Hello, welcome to the Bible Standard. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe, and drop a comment in the comments area if you have any questions. We'll do our best to reply.
I'm just going to remind you of a couple of things, some of the threads that we talked about in number 6 before we plunge into the section from verse 9 to the end of the chapter. You might recall that we talked about that phrase, all the days of his separation. And there they are, verse 4, verse 5, you've got it twice there, all the days be fulfilled. Then down in verse 12, the days twice, and verse 13, when the days are fulfilled. So all in all, there are 8 references. 8 times the days of the vow are referred to. And we know, as we said before, that 8 is the number of immortality. So the whole objective of the Nazarite principle and the Nazarite vow was to bring men and women to eternal life. And it's all based, as you know, upon Leviticus 8, and we referred to verses 33 and 35. You shall not go out of the door of the tabernacle, Yahweh commanded Aaron and his sons, in 7 days, until the days of your consecration be at an end. For 7 days shall he consecrate you. Therefore shall ye abide at the door of the tabernacle of the congregation day and night 7 days, and keep the charge of Yahweh that ye die not, for so I am commanded. So I think you could clearly see the importance of that, because here was the high priest and his sons being consecrated for their service as Yahweh's representatives to the people and the people's representatives to Yahweh. And when the Nazarite, either male or female, made their vow, they were going to model their high priest. And because the high priest and his sons were consecrated within that period of 7 days, it's clearly, isn't it, clearly aiming towards the final objective of Nazariteship, was that if you were faithful, you remained faithful, then you would have the reward that came at the end of that period. You would be involved in that 7th day and beyond. So I think that probably is fairly plain from what we see there in number 6 in Leviticus chapter 8. So going back then to this word Nazar. Nazar occurs 13 times in Numbers chapter 6 about the separation of the head. And all 4 previous occurrences are translated crown. The crown of the high priest, mitre. He had a mitre, and around that was this golden plate, a plate of gold which had inscribed in it those words, the holiness to Yahweh. Exodus 29:6, 39:30, Leviticus 8:9 and 21:12. 5 times in number 6, Nazar is closely identified with the head. For example, the word consecration in the King James, the consecration of his God is upon his head. That's that word, Nazar, in verse 7. The head of his separation used twice in verse 18. So it is a critical word in this chapter. And the key lesson is clear, isn't it? Just wrapping up what we considered in our first study, the key lesson is the keeping of the head separate all the days of the vow will ultimately lead to immortality. And in our case, of course, that vow we made when we were baptised. But, verse 9. All right, there's always a but, isn't there, when human beings are involved. So verse 9 says, and if any man die very suddenly by him. Now in the Hebrew, the word for die is used twice. When you have that happen in Hebrew, it's intense. It doubles or intensifies the meaning. So if you were literally reading this, it would be, if any die, the word man should be die. If any die. What does that mean? It's talking about the breaking of the vow, isn't it? Apparently and evidently accidentally. So it's unavoidable in the sense that he or she did not mean to break the vow, but it's broken by contact with a dead body. If any man, or as it should be, if any die very suddenly by him, and he hath defiled the head of his consecration, there's our word Nazar, Then he shall shave his head in the day of his cleansing. On the 7th day shall he shave it, and on the 8th day he shall bring 2 turtle doves or 2 young pigeons to the priest, the door of the tabernacle of the congregation. And it's going to go and talk about the renewal of the vow and the loss of the days that had been completed in that vow. So let's just say you had vowed for a year and you ended up contacting a dead body after 11 months. Then when you went back to complete the vow, you had to go right back to the beginning. You had to do the whole 12 months all over again. This is very important, brothers and sisters. You're going to see it's very important in relation to our life in the truth. Because we all, along the way, will fail. There'll be sin involved in some way. Some defilement will come into our life. What does God expect of us? Well, he tells us, a new start. Go back and make a new start. Now, Abraham had to do this. When Abraham went down to Egypt in Genesis chapter 12 and he lied, told, a half-truth about Sarah, or Sarai as she was then, and said she's my sister. She goes into the harem of Pharaoh. Pharaoh piles enormous amounts of goods on him, right? And he's kicked out of Egypt, basically, because God gets involved. Pharaoh finds out. What does he do? Genesis 13, it's clear. He goes back and he makes a new start. He went back to where he was at the first. He went back, it was repeated. He went back to where he was at the beginning, 2 different Hebrew words. And what he did was he made a completely new start. He began well in Genesis 12, verses 6 to 8, but he'd messed up. And we all fail, don't we, along the way? What does God expect? Go back to Taurus. Go back and make a new start. And that's what happens here in the Nazarite vows. We shall see. So there is defilement by death. As I said, the literal Hebrew is when the dead dieth. 2 identical Hebrew words. And Rotherham's translation, but if one that is dying should die by him in a moment, suddenly. So it happens out of the blue, so to speak. Now, the thinking Nazarite would ask, well, why should I be blamed for another dying beside me? How can I help that? See? So God puts this law in there so that a thinking Nazarite would say, there's got to be a reason for this. What does it mean? What does it mean to me? And how often would it happen anyway? That someone kills over beside you? So the stipulation is designed to generate thought. It is a symbolic representation of unintentional sin through the weakness of our nature. That is, transgression not premeditated. David writes, doesn't he? He says in Psalm 19, he says, keep back thy servant from presumptuous sins. In other words, if you intend to sin, well, yeah, okay, you can be forgiven, but, you're the problem. Whereas you and I, brothers and sisters, were born with a nature that is biased towards sin, and it is impossible for human beings of 2 human parents to be perfectly obedient. We had a brother once who taught that God could have used any one of us to redeem the human race. How ridiculous is that? He had to be the Son of God. That was the only way. We are incapable of being perfectly obedient. So sin's going to come into our life along the way. That's why the language is used. But if one that is dying should die by him in a moment, suddenly. I want you to come to Romans chapter 7. Paul understood this perfectly. In Romans 7, verse 18, and you're very familiar with this context, I'm sure. He says, for I know that in me, that is, in my flesh, dwelleth no good thing. For the will is present with me, but how to perform that which is good I find not. For the good that I would, I do not, but the evil which I would not, that I do. Now if I do that I would not, it is no more I that do it, but sin that dwelleth in me. I find then a law, that when I would do good, evil is present with me. For I delight in the law of God after the inward man, but I see another law in my members, warring against the law of my mind and bringing me into captivity to the law of sin which is in my members. O wretched man that I am, who shall deliver me from, it says in the King James, from the body of this death. Now that's not a great translation, to be honest. Here is the ISV, the International Standard Version. Who will rescue me from this body of death? So what's Paul talking about? Well, he's talking about the Roman practice of tying a dead, rotting, corrupting body to a living captive. This is Barnes in his commentary. He says, some have supposed that he refers to a custom practiced by ancient tyrants of binding a dead body to a captive as a punishment and compelling him to drag the cumbersome and offensive burden with him wherever he went. Is that how we conceive the situation of our nature? Well, I think we need to think about that. Who shall deliver me from this body of death? And in Paul's mind, because he knew all about what the Romans did, they tied a corrupting body to a living one. You know what happens, of course. So it's a pretty powerful way of presenting it, isn't it? We've got a problem. It's Jeremiah 17 verse 9, that the heart of man is deceitful above all things and desperately sick. I know that to be true. You all know it to be true. So a couple of references were made back there in that previous slide. One of them was this one, 1 Corinthians 10 verses 12 to 13. Wherefore let him that thinketh he standeth take heed lest he fall. As soon as you get confident that you're doing pretty well, my experience is, brothers and sisters, the next moment I'm crashing down. Are you different to me? Or have I got some companions in the audience? I think I've got a few companions. As soon as you think you've got it right, that's your most dangerous time, because the flesh is going to bring you down. There hath no temptation taken you, says Paul, but such as is common to man. So none of us are going to be tempted by something that's outside the ken of the human race, outside the limits of the human race. We're all burdened with the same problem. But God is faithful, who will not suffer you to be tempted above that ye are able, but will with the temptation also make a way to escape that ye may be able to bear it, providing, of course, we want to take the way of escape. The Nazarite had good intent, but he's got a nature like yours and mine. And this is what that's about. It's about what God wants from us when we fail. And we will fail along the way. If you've made a lifelong vow, a Nazarite vow, to follow in the steps of your great high priest, to try and model yourself on him, I can tell you along the way you're going to fail here and there. Sometimes massively, like David did. Right? So what's the answer? What do you do when that happens? Well, listen to Brother Barling again. He's going to talk about the days lost in a minute. And he says this about the verses. I'm going to come back to Numbers chapter 6, and the verses that he's talking about are verses 10 to 12 of Numbers chapter 6. And I think we might just read them first before I read out what he's got to say. Numbers chapter 6, we've got verse 9, which we've read. Then you've got the reference to the offerings, which we read in verse 10, and come down to verses 11 and 12. And the priest shall offer the one for a sin offering, so there are two birds involved here. One for the sin offering and the other for a burnt offering. So the sin offering is obvious, isn't it? If there's a failure, there's a need for forgiveness. And the burnt offering is also pretty obvious, because once that sin's forgiven, there needs to be a recommitment. To make an atonement for him that he sinned by the dead, and shall hallow his head that same day. So what I've been saying, brothers and sisters, is essentially this. It's like Paul says, it's not I that do it, it's my nature. I didn't intend to do this. My nature's got the better of me. Weakness has overtaken me. All right? I didn't want to do it, but we're all in that boat, aren't we? We all understand that. So what do you do? Verse 12, he shall consecrate unto Yahweh the days of his separation. Now we'll see what that means in a minute. And shall bring a lamb of the first year for a trespass offering. But the days that were before shall be lost, because his separation, notice it doesn't say his head, it says his separation, his Nazar was defiled. So Brother Barling says this about the days lost. The Nazarite was meant to be, to every single member of the priestly people, a living exhortation, an object lesson in holy living, an embodiment of the very notion of being an Israelite indeed. The days that were before shall be lost, because his separation was defiled, Numbers 6:12, we just read. He had therefore to fulfil not only that part of his period of consecration, which in any case remained to him, but also the previous day's service thus lost to him. He had in fact to begin his entire consecration afresh. The lesson for every reflective Israelite was plain. Each time that by sinning he was false to his status as one of a dynasty of priests, need I say any more? We all know where we are, aren't we, in that situation? Each time that by sinning he was false to his status as one of a dynasty of priests, he had to begin afresh and make good his failure by consecrating himself anew to God. The lesson was a salutary one indeed, and a real education in acceptable worship. Now you notice down the bottom there, I've put the operative principle in this. And I want you to have a look with me at Ezekiel chapter 18. This is a pretty important verse to all of us, but especially to people like David, who committed the sin with Bathsheba, the murder of Uriah, which was forgiven. Now, he couldn't forgive himself. He says in Psalm 51, doesn't he? My sin is ever before me. He couldn't forgive himself. But God had forgiven him. And therefore, it's not in his record. So David could make a new start. So come to Ezekiel chapter 18. You get a similar passage, by the way, in Ezekiel 33. But in Ezekiel 18, verse 21, we read this. But if the wicked, now that word wicked, by the way, if you look at another translation like Rotherham, he will use the term lawless. And by lawless, he means you've broken a law, right? You've ignored a law. But if the wicked will turn from all his sins that he hath committed and keep all my statutes and do that which is lawful, see, that lines up with unlawfulness, and right, he shall surely live, he shall not die. All his transgressions that he hath committed, they shall not be mentioned unto him. In his righteousness that he hath done, he shall live. Now, just think about that for a while, verse 22. All his sins, he says, will not be mentioned unto him. Now, the great thing about that is that when David sits down with the angel in the day, when the interview is undertaken, before he, along with us later on, end up being brought before Christ to be waved either to right or left, because he's not going to do any interviewing. Most he will say in the judgment seat is, I never knew you, or, I'm pleased that you can pass to my right. He won't be inquiring into people's life. The angels will do that. When David sits down with the angel, and we're all going to have to go through this pretty soon, there will be no record of 9 months of his life. No bad, no good. Because you can't make a start again until the past is put behind you. You see, what David had to do is what a Nazarite had to do. You have to make a fresh start. And the record has been adjusted for him. The sins are forgiven, they're not there. Blank pages, and there is a record. Blank pages in the record, okay? That's what is meant here. Have I any pleasure, says Yahweh in verse 23, at all that the lawless should die, saith Adonai Yahweh, and not that he should return from his ways and live. But when the righteous turneth away from his righteousness and committeth iniquity, and doeth according to all the abominations that the wicked man doeth, shall he live? All his righteousness that he hath done shall not be mentioned. In his trespass that he hath trespassed, and in his sin that he hath sinned, in them shall he die. You know what that means? All the good. Like the Nazarite who's kept the portion of his vow before he sins or is defiled by death, all right? All that is gone. It's wiped out. He's got to make a new start and do it all over again. Now that's the principle, that's the operative principle that we see here in Numbers chapter 6. And, you know, as Brother Barling says, it's a real education in acceptable worship. People who think, well, I've got this accumulation of good works. Oh, no, look, I failed in that, I sinned in that. If that's not set right, none of that other stuff's mentioned. None of the good. Go back to Tours, make a new start, make a fresh start like Abraham did. And chapter 13 of Genesis, he gets it right, having made his fresh start. So that's a very important principle. It's a new start, as we say, making a new start. So they made a new beginning on the 8th day. Isn't that telling you that 8's the number of a new beginning that leads to immortality? And the ritual was based on the cleansing of the leper. Leviticus 14:22. The very same sacrifices were made if a leper was cleansed under the law. Can you recall any leper that was cured under the law? Maybe Miriam, but not too many. So it wasn't something they saw very often. So the same sacrifice. What were they for? Sin offering, the need for forgiveness. Burnt offering. Rededication, making a new start in your service to God. A trespass offering. Why a trespass offering? Well, it's an acknowledgement that God had been robbed of service. You had made a vow that you were going to serve him for a set period of time. It's been broken, right? You have actually robbed God because you've now got to go back and do the whole thing again. So there's a trespass offering involved. They had to start the days of the vow all over from the beginning. Like I said, Genesis 13, verses 3 and 4. Have a good look. Have a look at that in your own time, brothers and sisters. I've just been doing it in comments on the readings for Genesis. It is a very, very important principle. Okay, let's leave the negative behind, shall we? Let's enter into the positive, because from verse 13 onwards, it's really positive. We come to the completion, the successful completion of the vow. Now, in your case and in my case, this means when we're taken to the judgment seat, whether that's out of the grave or alive and kicking. When we go to the judgment seat, that's when our probation comes to an end. So this is what we're talking about here, the completion of our vow. The Nazarite is going to show us what happens. Let's just read, shall we? Because we didn't get to read. Or did we? Yeah, we read from verse 13. So let's just read this again, verse 13. And this is the law of the Nazarite. When the days of his separation, his Nizar, are fulfilled, he shall be brought unto the door of the tabernacle of the congregation. What does that mean to you? Does it ring any bells? When Aaron and his sons were consecrated in Leviticus chapter 8, the whole nation came to the door of the tabernacle to watch what happened. Now, this Nazarite, male or female, has completed their vow because they want to be like their high priest. So where do they go? The door of the tabernacle, where Aaron was and his sons. Because they're going to become a priest. Oh, for a short while, but they're going to become a priest because of the successful completion of their vow, which is exactly, brothers and sisters, what's going to happen to you and me. We successfully complete the vow we made at baptism. We're going to become priests for 1,000 years. So this is what this is setting forth. So let's have a look at these principles. The whole range of sacrifices were to be made, except for trespass, not like the one who's failed, all right, got to make a trespass offering because he's robbed God. No trespass offering here, but there's a whole range of sacrifices, including meal and drink, or bread and wine, which, by the way, tells us something very important. You could not offer a burnt offering or a peace offering without a meal offering and a drink offering. Why? Well, it's pretty simple. Because if you wanted to make a burnt offering to dedicate yourself to God, you go down to your herd or your flock, you look at your animals and say, that one's perfect, right? I'm not going to make an offering that's not perfect. That one's perfect. You put a rope around its neck, you lead it up to the priest, to the tabernacle in this case. The priest deals with it, cuts the throat, etc., and then offers it in the head, fat, innards, etc., and you're standing there watching. What have you done about that? So God says, if you come with a burnt offering or a peace offering in which you sought fellowship with him, you must bring a meal offering and a drink offering, which is why in the Bible, Leviticus 1 is about a burnt offering and Leviticus 2 is about a meal offering. If I was writing the Bible, and thankfully none of us are, or would, if I was writing it, I would have had the sin offering first because that's our biggest problem. I would have had the trespass offering second. Then I would have had the burnt offering and the peace offering. Not God. Leviticus 1, burnt offering. Leviticus 2, meal offering. Why? Well, think about it for a while. Easy to lead an animal down to the priest and have it killed. What about producing fine flour? You got any farmers in our midst? You've got to plough the fields in the winter, cold, rainy winter of November, December in the northern hemisphere. You've got to then scatter the seed and kick the dirt over it with your feet, wait until there's some growth and protect it from wild animals, and there are a few farmers in the place. And then you've got to wait, it grows and it's ripened, and you go out and you use a scythe to cut it down, and you cut it off with a cart to a hilltop, and then you smash it, and you throw it up in the air and winnow it, and you get the grain and sift out all the dirt, and then you go and you grind it, and wow, months of work. What's God saying? Same with wine, isn't it? Getting the best wine. How much work you've got to put into that? You know what God's saying, brothers and sisters? I want you to dedicate yourself to me. And I want to have fellowship with you. But don't think you can come and make the commitment without following through with your effort. Don't make commitments to me without following through. I want some effort from you. And we come on a Sunday morning. What do we partake of, brothers and sisters? Bread and wine. There's a reason for that. There's a need to remember that God wants performance, that he wants our performance to match our profession. That's the principle of that. So let's go through some of these things. There is one unusual feature here. No leaven was allowed with the peace offering here, or in Leviticus 7, 12 to 13 in the consecration of Aaron. In Leviticus 8, verses 2 to 26 in the consecration of Aaron. But you could, under normal circumstances, offer leaven with a peace offering. Did you know that? Just have a quick look. I'm going to keep my hand in number 6, and I'm going to have a look at Leviticus chapter 7. Leviticus 7, verse 11. This is the law of the sacrifice of peace offerings which he shall offer unto Yahweh. And if he offer it for a thanksgiving, and it's first for a reason, then he shall offer with the sacrifice of thanksgiving unleavened cakes mingled with oil, and unleavened wafers anointed with oil, and cakes mingled with oil of flour fried. Now you notice there's 3 references to oil there. So you've got fine flour, which takes a lot of work. How do you produce the kind of works that God wants? Well, by the influence of the word, isn't it? So there's oil involved. But look at the next verse. The next verse says, besides the cakes, he shall offer for his offering leavened bread. Really? So how come you could offer a peace offering with leavened bread? You'll notice there's no reference to oil there in that verse. So what was God saying to Israel? I want to have fellowship with you. Your sins are forgiven. You've made the right offerings for that. I want to have fellowship with you, but I want you to bring along unleavened cakes and bread, which has been mingled with oil. I'm the producer of that. My word's the producer of that. But I also want you to bring along leavened bread. No oil involved. You know what God's saying? You're the problem. The reason that you are seeking fellowship with me is because you broke it. You broke it by your sins and your transgressions. And by bringing leavened bread, no oil, you're confessing and acknowledging that you're the problem. Not me, you. It's your sins that have caused the break in our fellowship. But there's no leavened bread for the Nazarite when he makes, or he or she makes, their peace offering. So that's an unusual feature, but it's an important one. It's all based on Aaron's consecration, where there was no leaven involved in his consecration in the use of the peace offerings. Nezer occurs 6 times in this section. In the type, of course, it's the end of mortal probation. The vow is finished. Unleavened, obviously a symbol of incorruptibility, occurs 5 times in this section, because 5 is the number of grace. The gift of God is eternal life. So the principles of the completed vow are set out there in that verse 13. When the days of his separation are fulfilled, he shall be brought unto the door of the tabernacle of the congregation, just like Aaron was when he was consecrated, and the whole nation stood there to watch what was happening. In verse 14, we read the offerings that were to be made. He shall offer his offering unto Yahweh 1 he-lamb of the first year without blemish for a burnt offering, and 1 ewe-lamb of the first year without blemish for a sin offering, and 1 ram without blemish, notice the emphasis on without blemish, for a peace offering, and a basket of unleavened bread, cakes of fine flour mingled with oil, and wafers of unleavened bread anointed with oil. Notice the prevalence of oil, and their meal offering and their drink offerings. And the priest shall bring them before Yahweh, and shall offer his sin offering and his burnt offering, and he shall offer the ram of the peace offering. Almost identical, isn't it, to the way that Aaron was consecrated. 1 ewe lamb for a sin offering. This was the sin offering for any one of the common people. We read that in Leviticus chapter 4. The ewe lamb, the female lamb, was for those who offered a sin offering among the common people. What's God saying? He's saying to the Nazarite, you've completed a vow. And the problem is human pride. I've completed the vow. That's the problem. When you look at the peace offering, the most important one was the thanksgiving. You could eat it only on the first day. There were 2 other types of peace offering in Leviticus 7. There was the vow and there was the free will. And when I ask people, which do you think is most important to God, I normally get the response, the free will, because, you've done it freely. Wrong. You could eat the vow and free will offering for 2 days, but only 1 day for the thanksgiving offering. It was the most important one to God. So why? Well, think about it for a while. If I vow, that's me committing myself to God. I'm going to do something for God. If I decide to make a free will offering, it's me. I'm going to offer something to God. But thanksgiving is not about doing anything other than acknowledging what God has done for you. It's not about you. That's why it's the most important. And if we want to improve our performance, brothers and sisters, in prayer, focus on thanksgiving. It is the most important thing to our God. Thanksgiving and gratitude. It's something that took me a long time to learn. Because my natural way of thinking is, I'm going to commit myself. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. I'm going to visit the sick. Yeah, and so you should. But that's not the most important thing to God. That's what you're doing for him. But when you give thanksgiving, you're acknowledging what he has done for you. So these are the principles that are taught to the Nazarite. Don't have hubris, the hubris of human pride. Like Paul says in Romans chapter 12, verse 3, that every man that is among you should not think of himself more highly than he ought to think. So he made the Nazarite offer the offering of the common people, the ordinary everyday people. And one ram without blemish for a peace offering, modelled, of course, on the consecration of Aaron in Leviticus chapter 8, verses 22 to 29. So let's then come to the really exciting part here in number 6. It's in verses 16 and 17. We've just seen that verses 16 and 17 about the sin offering, then the burnt and the peace in the right order. They're the appropriate order. Then we come to the next verse, verse 18, which tells us about what the Nazarite's going to do once these offerings have been made. Verse 18, and the Nazarite shall shave the head of his separation at the door of the tabernacle of the congregation, and shall take the hair of the head of his separation. So you get the idea. It's not the hair of separation, it's the head of his separation, and put it in the fire which is under the sacrifice of the peace offering. So the peace offering was there to have fellowship with God. And the reason that he can have fellowship with God is because of the head of his separation. So the hair is taken off and cast into that fire. You can see the idea there, can't you? His hair was burnt with the peace offering. That fellowship with God depends on the state of mind, on the holiness of the mind. It's typical, of course, of the surrender of mortality to take up immortality because of the head of separation. And verse 19 says, and the priest shall take the sodden shoulder of the ram. Now, the shoulder is actually the thigh. The most important part of the offering was always the thigh. And of course, four-legged animals have got sort of like four of them. They've got two shoulders at the front, but it's the thigh that's referred to. It's the priest portion. He shall take the sodden shoulder of the ram, and one unleavened cake out of the basket, one unleavened wafer, and shall put them on the hands of the Nazarite. Notice that there are a couple of italicised words at the end of that verse, where it says the hair. You can cross them out, they're not in the text. He shall put them on the hands of the Nazarite after his separation, his Nazar, is shaven. The focus is on the head. So the Nazarite was given the priest portion, the right thigh, Leviticus 7:34. And the priest was to take it and put it on the hands. He placed this portion on the hands of the Nazarite in order to wave it. And you'll notice it goes on to talk about that in verse 20. The priest shall wave them for a wave offering before Yahweh. Now, a wave offering was exactly that. When the offering, the right thigh, was put in the hands of the Nazarite and the priest's hands would be underneath his hands, it was waved like that. Now, why? Well, to draw God's attention. But does God need his attention drawn? No. But that was done so that the priest who was doing it, all right, knew that God would recognise it. He was doing it because he wanted God to recognise it as being consecrated unto him. But there's also a heave offering, isn't there? Look, read further on in verse 20. This is holy for the priest, with the waved breast and heaved shoulder. And after that, the Nazarite may drink wine. Now, the heave offering was exactly what it means. It's a heave offering. So you heaved it towards heaven. Whereas the wave offering was about consecration or setting something apart for God, the heave offering was about surrender. Willing surrender. Now you can get an image in your mind, you know, if you've got a young child, for example, and that child has picked up something that you don't want them to have, you say, look, Johnny, bring that to me. And Johnny comes up, you know, little Johnny, here, Dad, all right? So they heave it up, they surrender it. And that's what a heave offering meant. So think about this for a while. What have we got here? Well, we've got a Nazarite who acts as the priest. He's actually, the offering, the thigh is in his hand. This is the priest portion normally given to the priest. It's in his hands. He's waving it. Mind you, the actual priest probably got his hands underneath, but he's acting as the priest. He's heaving it to Yahweh. So for a short time, the Nazarite becomes a priest. What a delight that would be, if you were a Nazarite. Because the law kept you away. It kept you away, but it allowed you, under this law of the Nazarite, to become a priest. And so then you could drink wine. The vow is over. This is typical of immortality. You won't be affected by wine as an immortal. You can be affected by wine or strong drink as a mortal, but not as an immortal. It's telling us, brothers and sisters, it's typical of the time when we're going to be changed. Mortal priests were forbidden wine while they were serving, Leviticus 10 verse 9. And the day is coming when we shall be changed. The nature that can bring us low will be gone. When someone gets baptised, we sing normally 2 hymns. I'm sure you do the same as we do at home. Hymn 166 and 167. There's no problem with that. It's just that that's not where it is in the right order. Because you see, we've just read about the successful completion of the Nazarite vow. Look what we then read. Verse 22. And Yahweh spake unto Moses, saying, Speak unto Aaron and unto his sons, saying, On this wise ye shall bless the children of Israel, saying unto them, On what wise? Well, on the successful completion of the vows. All right? Yahweh bless thee and keep thee. Yahweh make his face to shine upon thee and be gracious unto thee. Yahweh lift up his countenance upon thee and give thee peace. And we'll come to the last verse in a minute. So this is the blessing of true Nazarites. This is the blessing of those who actually completed their vow. There's no problem with singing at someone's baptism, but that's the beginning of the vow. This is talking about the end of the vow, which in all of our cases is not going to be too long. Okay, so it's the blessing obtained at the end of faithful Nazariteship. Now, what does it mean to bless? I want you to turn to Acts 3, verse 26, 25 and 26. And this is something that those who are younger in our midst, if you've listened to nothing else, listen to this. Acts chapter 3. When you get baptised, you're baptised into Christ and you become the seed of Abraham. True? Galatians 3, 26 to 29. And therefore you become the subject of the promises. Promises were, I will bless thee. Remember that? And I will bless those who bless you and curse those who curse you. What does that mean? If you read that to a churchgoer outside, they'd think of the priest, you know, with his little censer with smoke and... Come on. What does it mean? Well, we know what it means. Acts chapter 3, verse 25 and 26, where Peter, addressing the Jews who were very familiar with the scriptures, he says, Ye are the children of the prophets and of the covenant which God made with our fathers, saying unto Abraham, And in thy seed shall all the kindreds of the earth be blessed. So what does that mean? Verse 26 tells you. Unto you first, the Jews, God having raised up his son Jesus, sent him to bless you. I'm pausing for a deliberate reason. I want you to look at the page. In turning away every one of you from his iniquities. So when you think about that, brothers and sisters, the blessing of Abraham is God working in your life to turn it around, to turn you away from your iniquities. That's a true blessing, isn't it? So when we sing that wonderful hymn, Yahweh Bless Thee, you know what we're singing? We're really encouraging that person who's just been baptised to work with God. Because if he's going to bless them, they have to get their head into his book, the Word, so he can change the way they think and change the way that they live. He's going to turn them away from their iniquities. Need I say any more? The word keep means that. Keep, preserve. Preserve from iniquity by the light of divine character and grace. Yahweh bless thee and keep thee. Yahweh make his face to shine upon thee. So the divine countenance, as it were. The face to shine means, of course, the teaching of statutes. As Psalm 119 verse 135, thy word is a lamp under my feet. You've got peace there. Give thee peace, we sing. What does that mean? Does it mean you're not going to have any problems in life? It means that you're never going to have any arguments or difficulties? No. The word shalom means unity. It has the idea of unity, of fellowship. It foreshadows, of course, eternal fellowship with God. It's about having that relationship with our God. That's why the last verse of the chapter says this. And they shall put my name upon the children of Israel, and I will bless them. Now, the whole point of Nazariteship was to model yourself on the high priest. And when you saw the high priest, what did you see? Well, you saw that. You saw his turban, his mitre, and you saw this golden plate held there by a blue cord. And the object of Nazariteship was to emulate that high priest because there was holiness to Yahweh in his mind. That's the message that God's getting through. Memorialised his mental and moral separation to Yahweh. Now I want to just show you something in conclusion that I think is beautiful. When you look at those passages like Ezekiel 28, 36 to 38, and you come across that word plate, right, the golden plate, you'll see there the plate on the right-hand side of the high priest's head, the plate of the holy crown of pure gold. That word plate's very important. It's that Hebrew word there, you see the yellow, T-S-I-Y-T-S, don't ask me to pronounce it. Something like tzitz. Hebrews would laugh at that, but anyway, there's Hebrew people here. But that's an important word. You know why? Because of Numbers 15. Come to Numbers 15. Verse 37 of Numbers 15. Yahweh spake unto Moses, saying, and I want you to notice what it next says. Speak. This is not command. This is not a demand. This is an appeal. Speak unto the children of Israel, the family builders of Israel, and bid them, the word means to say to them that they make them fringes in the borders of their garments throughout their generations, and that they put upon the fringe of the borders a riband of blue. Now you remember that golden plate, right, was actually hurled on the high priest's mitre by a blue cord. So they tied the blue cord around the back. It was there just to keep the plate on his head. Didn't have the cord, the plate would fall off. So what's the important thing here, do you think? Just read on. It says, verse 39, and it shall be unto you for a fringe, that ye may look upon it, that is, upon the fringe. And remember all the commandments of Yahweh, and do them, and that ye seek not after your own heart and your own eyes, after which ye used to go a-whoring. So at the end of verse 38, we were told that they had this fringe And they had a ribband of blue. So what's the most important? The ribband of blue or the fringe? It's the fringe. That they may look upon the fringe. See that word on the screen? T-S-I-Y-T-S-I-T-H. It's the feminine form of the word for plate. That word for plate's masculine. It's on the head of the high priest. This is about a fringe on the bottom of your garment which surrounds your feet. It's got a ribband of blue at the bottom, but the important thing is the fringe. In the high priest's plate there was holiness to Yahweh. And when we try and model ourselves on the high priest, we've got to walk in his ways. We're walking within the bounds of the fringe. The feminine form of that masculine word. Do I need to say any more, brothers and sisters? Jesus Christ, as high priest, is our head, representing holiness to Yahweh. The ecclesia, his body, his coming bride, is represented by the fringe encircled with a blue cord, must walk according to his mind. And I looked, says Revelation 14 verse 1, and lo, a lamb stood on the Mount Zion, and with him 144,000 having his Father's name written in their forehead. Holiness unto Yahweh.
Don't forget to hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow. Drop a comment in the comment section and let us know what you thought. And make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a new upload. Please share it and spread the word. Thanks for watching. And remember to come back soon.